When it comes to money, Ramsey Plus is the all-access membership to the best content, tools, and resources. Like it's Financial Peace University and so much more through a brand new digital format that they've put together. So giving everyone in your church or organization the tools they need to budget, save, and take control of their money is easier than ever. A Ramsey Plus site license is the most flexible, efficient, and cost-effective way to bring Ramsey Plus to your people. And you'll get a dedicated relationship manager and all the support you need for every step of the way. To learn more, we've arranged with our friends at Ramsey Plus for you to get and to watch a demo webinar that the Ramsey Plus team has put together. All you have to do is go to daveramsey.com/CC webinar. That's daveramsey.com/CC webinar.
Welcome to the Church Communications Podcast. We want to help you become a church communications expert. We understand it can be a challenging and ever-changing role because we've worked in the church too, which is why we built a community with over 25,000 church leaders that are ready to support and cheer you on. Your hosts for the show are Allred and Kenny Jahng, who want to help equip you to reach more of your congregation and community. This is the place where we'll talk shop with fellow practitioners and professionals about what's working, what's not, and what's next. Are you ready? Let's get started.
Well, welcome to the Church Communications Podcast. Another episode today. My name is Allred, and as always, joined by my wonderful friend, business partner, Kenny Jahng.
Kenny,
how are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm really glad we are. It's one of those things where I've been Zooming a lot. I think I crossed 160 hours last month, which is
a lot of Zoomies.
A lot of Zoomies. But you know what? One of the things I love is connecting with people like you. I think there's a difference when it's just task oriented and then when you're getting together to actually do stuff or collaborate. And this is just one of those times. So thankful for you, Katie. I'm thankful.
Yeah, thankful for you too. Okay, so today we're talking about how your church can get up to speed on digital content. The bottom line really is that we need a mindset shift if we're a church communicator today from in-person to online. What does that look like, So I guess the first question is why? Why does your church need to start thinking like a content producer?
Yeah, I think the bottom line is just look around and just observe life, right, Katie? It's like today's culture demands content experiences for any brand relationship, right? Every brand, every company, every organization right now is a content publisher, and this last 6 months has accelerated it. But just think about just what everyone does from the baseline is you're watching your phone, you're watching your laptop, you're watching your screens. What are you watching? You're watching Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, ESPN Plus, Apple.
Watching us.
Right? We should be calling this CC Plus or Church Communications Plus. But it's content, right? At the end of the day, it's content. So I guess the question here is if you're observing culture and you're seeing behavior, so how should churches be actually thinking about this then?
Yeah, I think the biggest one that a lot of churches easily can do is sermon repurposing. The sermon is evergreen content for the most part. I mean, there are some sermons that are very specific for today that maybe it doesn't make sense to use, but for the most part, like a sermon series on Romans will always be a sermon series on Romans, it's not going to change tomorrow. I guess there's new insights that God brings us, but at the same time, what I love about this idea of sermon repurposing, we can cut it up so that we can have clips that are shown every day on our Facebook page, then repurposing it too for YouTube. So what I hate is that most churches, I hate a strong word, but what I greatly dislike is that most churches will upload their sermons to YouTube and name it like July 28th, 2012.
Yes.
And that's it, that's all you get. Maybe in the description you get like Romans chapter 1. That's it though. And you're like, okay, if I'm not a believer, I have no idea what Romans chapter 1 covers, So if I search for something specific that happens, in Romans chapter 1, I'm not going to find this information. They're not going to pop up for sure, So you have to help the user who maybe doesn't know the Lord and also doesn't go to your church, how does that person find you? And so cutting these sermons up, this goes back to the last episode, cutting these sermons up so that they make sense with titles that make sense. Like, my friend just died, what do I do? Or I don't know how to pray, what do I do? I need help with my finances, what do I do? We need these kind of like titles that really speak to people, that people can find because they're searchable. And then of course, we've got live synchronous content. Your church should be streaming to not just one place, but all the places, because absolutely, it's not that hard now to do. So we might as well figure out how to do it. There's a couple different platforms that do that really well. I think Restream.io is one, and there's a couple of others, and probably the streaming service you're using as a church probably already does this or has this capability. But, stream to Facebook Live, stream to YouTube Live, figure out how to stream to Instagram Live, because I really think Instagram is about to be the next big thing for live. And so TikTok Live, there's so many different ways that we can go live. And so we need to create some of this content for that. I think we're just shifting, it is a big mindset shift for all of us. And so figuring that out, because you're a trusted source, but there's other trusted sources that we can use. We can curate this kind of content. So Kenny, what kind of curated content do you recommend?
Yeah, so I think there's different buckets of content that you can engage your people with. Obviously, the go-to is stuff that's Bible-centric, discipleship-worthy, church-related stuff where the right answer is Jesus, right? So the Bible Project is, I think, a resource that you and I highly recommend. They've got amazing animated videos that cover the entire Bible in terms of teaching content. They're just amazing, and it's appropriate for all age levels, completely free. You don't have to worry about paying for anything. So that stuff like that, right? You want to identify things that are just high quality and just video content, etc. And then there's personal finance stuff that we talked about, felt needs last time, whether it be relationships and parenting or life stages, etc. Personal finance is just one of those tips of the swords that any community member is going to be interested in. Ramsey Plus, our sponsors today, we've got a bunch of stuff. What else is in Ramsey Plus, Katie? It's not just FPU, right? There's other things in there.
There's other things in there, there's more. And so
explore it, right? I think it's just not, it's not one dimensional anymore, that all these trusted resources have the ability to, once there's a quality or level of excellence that they figured out, then they're able to give you more across the spectrum. So one question I think I have is what other types of content should churches be thinking about as a publisher? What form factors, or how should they be thinking about content?
I think they should be thinking about small content and not just large. The sermon itself is so long, or a worship service itself is very long, and I just don't think that people are consuming it quite the same. Now, not to say that people don't sit down and watch a whole worship service, because I think they do on Sunday mornings, especially if they've been a long time churchgoer. But I do think we need to start breaking this content out into biteable chunks, that really speak to people. And so, social media, just creating this really consumable, multi-platform content, I think is going to be really important. But I think my question I have for you is, what's one tip for how to have the most impact with your micro content?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think the one thing that people miss is consistency, right? Consistency is critical, and people 100%. They'll do spots, they'll go in phases, and they'll have some good content out there, and then they're like, oh, we don't get engagement. And I always say it's kind of like it's showing up just once in a while to your friend and then disappearing again. You got to stay in front of your audience, and you got to do it with something that's relevant to. You can't be talking about yourself all the time.
Right.
So that's again, that what type of content's important. So we talked about felt needs last time. Is that the type of content that we need to be consistent about? Should we just be talking about? I mean, that's the pushback, right? Churches and pastors typically tell us, "No,
Hmm.
we're the church. We should be talking about church and Jesus, and then
Right.
church, and then Jesus, and church, and then Jesus." I mean, is there a better way to do this, Katie?
I mean, Jesus didn't talk about him. I don't know, like about the church or that kind of stuff. He really shared stories and talked about people's lives. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's the same thing. We need to figure out how can we like break this up, um,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
so that we can really talk about. It's like bringing a megaphone to a tea party. You should talk about different things or whatever. And so, Kenny, I guess my question is, we talked about felt needs last time. Is the kind of content we need? What's the kind of content that we need to be
Yeah,
consistent?
so I think that's the question about this recommended mix, and this is one of the things that I think you do really well with the church communications group, right? Like, so for instance, if you're listening to this podcast and you're not in our Facebook group has close to now 27,000 members in it,
It's
and there's a
wild.
reason for that. There's a reason, and I'm sitting across right now the reason. Katie is a ninja at engagement, and you can tell by the content that is being posted in the group from the official church communications channel, right? That account, or even Katie or myself. Can you talk about that mix of how much are we supposed to be talking about ourselves as a church versus trying to talk about
Hmm.
the needs of the people, right? So
You know, it's kind of funny. So social media is a fine art. I think a lot of people think, God, just put something out there, and then that's kind of it. I can remember this one time. I just want to share this story. I just think it's funny. I was in charge of a social media platform for a large church, and I can remember one time one of the one of the pastor's wives came up and talked to me, and she said, uh, "How dare you post about what kind of toppings you want on your pizza on our social media platform? Don't you know that people are burning in hell right now?" Um, and you
that's a
know
tough
what?
conversation to have.
Yeah, it really, well, I was like, oh, I was not expecting that. But okay, like if we need to talk about it. Yeah, I do know. I think that the gospel is so important. I think digital strategy is so important for sharing the gospel. I think here's the thing though, Jesus did not thump people over the head with a Bible 24/7. That was not what he was doing. Jesus also took naps and broke bread and shared it with people. And, he probably asked people what kind of toppings they wanted on their bread or something at some point. And so here's the thing about social media, though. You have to play the game. The social media thing is a game. The algorithm is a game. And so you have to trick the algorithm to prefer you. And so sometimes you have to create this content that's not necessarily about your church or about the events that are going on at your church and about the people at your church. Sometimes you have to create content just because it's content that people want to talk about. Right. Maybe you've seen some of this content, these memes, maybe of it's different coffees, like, right. And it's like, how dark do you like your coffee? Right. And it's like, there's a bunch of numbers and people comment and say, I like it, as dark as number 13 is or whatever. And like, some people are like, I like it completely white. I just want like all, coffee creamer. And so here's the thing about, those posts on a church page. They really do increase the inevitability, increase the organic reach of your church's page. And so you have to play the game and put some content out there that's kind of fun or funny, because you know that the next post will be about the gospel. And that post may not go as well organically, but because you posted some funny stuff, it will actually shoot up higher because Facebook is recognizing, hey, they've got great content. Let's promote them again. So you do have to kind of play a game with it, and some people don't understand that. They only want to post this content that's very churchy, and I think there's room for both. We have to do both,
Oh, absolutely.
otherwise, you won't get the organic reach that you need.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we always explain it. We were on a call the other day. I think we were explaining that basically it's got going to a social gathering, whether it be someone's house for dinner or a cocktail party or a networking event
Hmm.
or a school event or
Right.
something, you don't want to just sit there and the equivalent of what you were being asked to do is basically bring a Bible and just start reading the Bible out loud 100% of the time that you're there.
Right.
You say it's a game, but it's just relationship building, it's finding interest. You want to mix it up. You're going to talk about current events, you're going to talk about sports, you're going to talk about
Right.
other common themes to get people engaged and just
Yeah.
quite frankly
It'll be so much fun when you're talking about pepperoni and, all that kind of stuff. Somebody down there is going to be like, I want anchovies. And,
yes,
then y'all can go at each other. It'll be, like that's about relationship building. It was just like if you're at a fellowship hall and
yes.
y'all are all eating pizza and some people are like, I want that sausage pizza. I want this pepperoni pizza. And, you're just talking about like, oh, I like this other stuff. I don't like pineapple on my pizza. You people are heathens or whatever. And so, I mean, I like it personally, but I just think that's where the real stuff, like the meat of relationship building happens is in the other times, because once you gain that trust, you have to gain trust first before you can change somebody's life
Absolutely.
with the gospel.
Absolutely.
I think we think, oh, we can just suddenly show up, guns a-blazing, and they're gonna just convert right then and there. And I'm
Well,
like, no, I mean, we've got to like slowly introduce ourselves as human beings and then introduce the gospel.
you hit it on the head. I think you want to be relatable to people, and you got to realize that you're on not the church grounds. You're on another person's turf, and that's social media,
Hmm.
social. And what you really want to do is you want to humanize yourself so that there's some attraction and some interest in what you have to say when you're teeing up the next call to action. So anyway, that I think that's a great story, and it's a great like teachable moment. I think that hopefully illustrates why you need to change the dial once in a while of what you're saying out there. And we talk about this all the time. But Katie, what's again? We refer to some of the examples of what we could do. What's the first baby step that people can take right now, like this week? We're not talking about like, oh, you need to wait for like the quarterly plan or the annual plan. What can they start doing this week in terms of finding content to put out there, repurposing it, remixing, etc.?
Yeah, I think the first step is just to take your sermon and get a transcript of it. Transcripts are very helpful. You can get
How
one.
do you do that? So what's the tool? Or how do you actually sit there and
Yeah, you can go to churchcommunications.com/rev. That's an affiliate link for us, but you do get $10 off. So that's why we recommend it. And so you can go to Rev, and then you can upload your sermon audio and get a transcript sent back to you. What I love about using a transcript is that you can put it into Google. What I did was I put it all into Google Docs. I put all of my transcripts into Google Docs because then they're searchable. So later on, when you want to quote from your pastor about something specific, you can just search in Google Docs. It makes your life so much easier. But okay, that's besides the point. All right, so now you got your sermon transcript. I went through there and highlighted portions
Mm.
that I was like, we could create a graphic with this. We could create a sermon clip with this. We could create other content with this. And so I would just highlight the whole thing, different portions of it, and then tell our video producer, okay, at this point and at this point, cut, like start and cut. And then after that, we would post those across different social media. We would dress them up a little bit, put some graphics over it or whatever. There's a great church that's doing such a fantastic job at this. Connect Calgary is, I think, a great
Yeah.
example. They're not necessarily cutting up these bite-sized chunks, but what they actually did was they completely changed the way they did their worship service. Because of the pandemic, like they were doing it the way they always did it, and like just like the pastor was on a stage preaching to no one, and the the worship team was there, were leading no one in worship, and and like it felt really odd to them as well, and so they were like, we're gonna change this, and I love it. They went back and they added, it was super graphical. They were like, we went and watched the top YouTubers and we
Yeah.
just copied what they were doing. And so they created these really fun intros and like pulled in members to record some stuff, via their phone. and they, had a worship team, but it was like in a house, and their pastor was preaching from home. And I just think, they really did a great job. So there's a lot of places we can publish this content. You should publish this content to your website. You should send it out via email. You should put it on YouTube, put it on Facebook pages, put it on groups, put it on IGTV. Create a whole lot of stories. Stories are really where it's at today, especially in Instagram. If you're going to do Instagram, you should be having stories. And so, let's figure out how to do it, because I think this is so important for sharing the gospel. If you don't hear anything else from us today, hear this, that creating micro content, creating content for the web, today is more crucial than ever for sharing the gospel, because there is somebody who is scrolling right now who needs to hear the hope the gospel can bring us.
I love that.
So how can we do it? We have to create this content that's so compelling that they stop scrolling and they say, hey, that's a topic that interests me. I'm wondering what they're talking about here, and watch it, So anyways, thank you so much for joining us today. Kenny, what else? Do you have some more things you want to add?
I think you summed it up, and this is one of those things that we want to inspire everybody here to just look at all the content you're producing now and figure out how to repurpose it. That's the number one thing. You don't need to reinvent the wheel from scratch. You've got the assets now. I mean, typically a church is on a 7-day production cycle. Again, as Katie said, your sermon is your core product, your piece. Start there, and once you have those rhythms and workflows, you'll figure out how to do more. So, Katie, I think this has been fun to just really share a bunch of this stuff. And I guess this season in particular has turned out to be, we have so many of these private consultations when we're coaching churches, and now I guess we're using this forum to actually share some of the stuff that we do with these churches, and we're helping them move ahead. And now hopefully people that are listening here together are going to be able to take some of these ideas and run with it on their own as well. So that's it for us today. We are going to come back next time for another episode of the Church Communications Podcast. In the meantime, smash that like button, leave a comment. If you're on Apple Podcast or all the podcast platforms, please leave a review. That is the number one way that you could be helpful to help us reach more churches, pastors, leaders, communicators, to help everyone become a better communicator for the gospel. I'm Kenny Jahng with Katie Allred. We'll check you out here next time on the Church Communications
Thanks
Podcast.
for listening to the Church Communications Podcast with Katie Allred and Kenny Jahng. If you liked our show today and want to learn more, you can join our Facebook group with over 25,000 church leaders. Simply search for Church Communications on Facebook. And if you liked today's episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review. It's the most impactful way you can help us reach more church leaders and equip them to become better communicators for the church. And finally, don't forget to check out our website at churchcommunications.com. Thanks for listening.